Alrighty, we're going to answer the question of how do you make roast corn chowder? Now, roast corn chowder is in a class by itself. Why is it in a class by itself? Because this soup is exclusive to the use of corn. Unlike cream soups or bisque soups, or cream of mushroom, cream of broccoli, cream of tomato, this process tends to be the same. In the case of the roast corn chowder, this soup and the process for making it is kind of exclusive to this. Now, some chowders are made similarly like this, but none of them are like this one. This one is in a class by itself. We're going to begin this one by talking to you a little bit about the corn. Now, your ingredient list calls for corn on the cob, shucked, or frozen corn if you can't get corn on the cob. And if you did get corn on the cob, it would tell you to shuck the corn, take the cobs, oil them a little bit, put them on a sheet pan, roasting pan, and cook them in the oven until they're a little bit brown, and then simmer them in chicken stock to make roast corn cob chicken stock. Now, that's one way. You don't have to do that, but that's, if you have an opportunity and you have the time, that's another way you can go about having a soup taste like roast corn, okay? And assuming that you don't have the corn on the cob and you're buying frozen corn, and I've made this multiple times both ways, with the cobs and without it. And in both cases, it's really, really good. So don't start thinking that you're cutting a corner when you're using the frozen. It's all going to depend on how you go about making the soup. And that's what I'm going to show you right now. To begin with, we take your corn kernels, which I got, which were frozen, and just put them in the oven plain the way they are, okay, on a sheet pan. Now, one of the things, putting it in there at like 400 degrees, that's probably going to take, excuse me, about half an hour. Now you get in there with a spatula every so often because it tends to brown on the corners of the sheet pan and kind of mix them all together so it browns evenly. And then the bacon, and I was talking to the producer about which pan we're going to cook the bacon on, and it came up that it was important for you to understand why I'm going to cook the bacon, this amount of bacon, on this pan rather than on a pan like this, okay, in terms of the size. Now, what we did was, now I made the bacon, which I'd like to get over here in a second if I could, right here, and I made some bacon in advance, and what I did was I took slices of bacon, and you have an entire lesson on how to make bacon lardoons, and this is just thick sliced bacon. This isn't exactly bacon lardoons. This is store-bought sliced bacon that's thick. Just cut it up in pieces. And put it on a sheet pan to render in the oven a little more slowly than you would trying to do this on top of the stove. If you try to render this on top of the stove, what's going to happen is it cooks too fast but doesn't render as much. Just the process of putting it in the oven makes the fat come out of it a little bit more. Now, the reason I'm using this pan instead of that pan is too big for this much bacon. Why is it too big for this much bacon? Well, throughout all the cooking, you'll find people referring to, if you're making a quart and a half of sauce, they'll say, well, get a 2-quart saucepan. Okay. They'll never say, get a 6-quart saucepan or an 8-quart saucepan to do a quart and a half of sauce. Why is that? Why do we keep referring to the appropriate size of the piece of equipment when we're making something? Here's the reason, and it would apply across the board to all of these applications of cooking in the right size piece of equipment, whatever it happens to be. The food absorbs the heat. Now, if I take this bacon and put it on that sheet pan, okay? Let me get this back over here, Richard. Sorry. Now, there's only so much bacon to absorb the amount of heat that's in the oven. This pan has to absorb the rest of the heat. And eventually this pan is going to buckle and bend. And basically buckle and bend. Those are what happens to pots and pans. If you cook 1 quart of soup in a 10-quart pan, that pan itself is going to have to absorb all that heat from the flame because there's no food in it to do so. Remember, the metal is designed to transmit the heat to the food from the flame. If you have buku metal with no food to transmit the heat to, then the metal has to absorb and hold the heat, and eventually it damages the metal. So that's why, in the big picture, we're always using the right size vessel, if you will, for cooking in for the amount of food that we have, all right? So we're going to take this bacon, and we're going to throw it in the oven also with the corn. And we're going to let those two cook. Meanwhile, I'm going to use the rendered bacon, and we're going to start the process of making this soup for you, okay? That old saying is, you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. I can stand the heat, and that's why I'm in here. I don't care if I sweat. Now, we're going to heat up our pan, and we're going to make sure that we have bacon fat in this recipe. And throughout life, do not throw your bacon fat away when you're cooking. I don't care what it's for. If you happen to be making bacon strips in the morning, save the bacon fat if you're not serving it, which you typically would not with your bacon. So we're going to put a little bit of bacon fat in here. And I ended up with probably about a half a cup of bacon fat I got in here, see? And we're going to put some of the bacon in accordance with the prescription that's in your ingredient list. And you can always add a little bit more bacon to the soup later if you think you need more. And into that bacon, we're going to put the onions and the red peppers that are in this recipe. And we're going to put the dried leaf thyme in there now, a little bit. And we're going to put a little bit of salt and pepper. And I'm going to take a swig of water. A little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, keeping in mind, again, like I always say when we're making something like this, is always be careful about trying to add what you think are all the seasonings to the soup, or whatever it is, in this case it's the soup, in the beginning stages of the cooking process. You're always waiting till the end during the finishing process to add the final amounts of salt and pepper that you think belong in there. I'm going to give that a little mix. And we're going to turn that down a little bit. And we're going to cook this stuff about, I'd say about 8 to 10 minutes. Now, if I was going to make this soup and I wasn't showing you how to do it, I would have roasted the corn probably yesterday and put it in a little container and put it in the fridge. So the day that I make the soup, I don't have to go roasting the corn and rendering the bacon. I had the bacon pre-rendered, and I might do that too. It depends on whether or not you have time. Sometimes you may just want to, be drinking a glass of wine on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon and walk around the house and take all the time in the world to make the pot of soup, and that's great. But if that's not the case, keep in mind that you can pre-brown the corn kernels and store them in the fridge. You can cut up all your veg and do the same thing with your rendering your bacon and put that in the fridge, okay? So we're going to time elapse this a lot longer than it takes to cook the veg because we're going to wait for the corn to be done. And I'll show you what that bacon looks like too after it's rendered in that pan. So we're probably going to time elapse here about a half an hour. So I'll be back 30 minutes right now, okay? And about 35 minutes roasting, toasting, whatever you want to call it, the corn. And you see how nice and toasty that is and brown that is? Look at that. Now that's got that roasty, toasty flavor, which is what the makeup of this soup needs to have, okay? And here's what the bacon looks like that we rendered also in that little pie pan. And that turned out pretty much just like the bacon I got over here that I pre-rendered earlier today, okay? So we're going to put this aside because we have enough bacon in the soup already. And we're going to add the mushrooms to the sauteed veg. I want to show you what we got here now. We got again, we got the bacon fat, the bacon, onions, red pepper, a little bit of thyme, a little pinch of salt and pepper. Now we're going to add the mushrooms to it. And we're going to add most of this corn to it right now. As you would imagine, the toastiness of this corn is going to come up in the soup. One of the interesting things about this soup also is that it's good when you first make it, and it gets better as it sits around. The only problem with it sitting around is that the soup can have a tendency to, some of the colors in the soup might degenerate on you a little bit, so you want to be careful how much you have it sitting around. Or you add your okra at the very end, just before you serve it, And we're going to talk about the problems that people have with okra, we're going to blanch some okra for the soup here in a minute while this is starting to cook. And the problems that people are having with okra, which are mainly the sliminess, if you will, and then I'm going to talk to you about how to de-slime your okra if you'd like to do that. Now, let me give this a mix. This soup, by the way, is moderately simple and easy to make, and it always turns out really good, which is nice. It's one of those kind of formulas. There's something about these ingredients together that just tastes good. It's really hard to screw this up, is what I'm trying to say. All right, we're giving that a little mix. Now we're going to add the garlic, which is consistent with the prescription that I have for in the ingredient list. And we're going to give that a quick mix. And now we're going to add the chicken stock. And I said you can, their ingredient list calls for chicken stock and or brown stock. You can use a little bit of both, or you can use all white. Typically, you can use all brown, but I don't recommend it. A little bit of brown is good, but I don't think all brown is good for this soup. It tends to look too dark, you know. I'm going to put some white stock in there. And I'm going to show you the proportions here of what I have. Because just like the country clam chowder and all chowders, you need to be cognizant of the proportion of food per ounce of liquid. Remember, chowder is food in a broth, basically. But you don't want it to look like corn stew with a little liquid, and you don't want it to look like consomme or something like that, or bouillon with a little bit of food in it. So you want to find that perfect balance. Let me just show you. And I need a ladle over here too, Louis. And the amount of food for the amount of liquid that we have here, okay? We're going to let that simmer for a few minutes. Meanwhile, we're going to blanch the okra. Thank you, sir. I've got some whole, fresh okra here, which is probably the best way to show you how to handle this product. Now, first we're going to do is we're going to shock it in boiling salted water, which is what I have right here boiling. And as soon as it gets a little bit green, we're going to take it off. Now, the amount of red pepper, the amount of bacon, the amount of cream, the amount of okra, they're all relative to a little bit about how much you want, but stay with my formula. I think it's a good idea. Now, we're going to time elapse this for about 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes while the okra blanches, and we'll be right back in a second to finish that off and shock it in the ice water. This is boiling, and I have some ice water here. And our soup, by the way, is kind of at a pretty high simmer back here, moving right along. That's good. All right, let's get the okra out. See how nice and green that is? You shock it in the ice water. Okay. Cool. Now, what happened to my French knife, Louis? I brought it over there. We're going to slice the okra up, and if you want it de-slimed, you simply let it sit under cold running water until it kind of de-slimes. It's not going to completely de-slime, but it will mainly de-slime. And all I'm going to do is put it back in the ice water here for a second, because I like it a little bit de-slimed, but one of the qualities of the okra is the slime. I'm sorry to put it quite like that. It kind of doesn't go together, quality and slime, but that's the way it works. We'll cut the ends off. Every time I see okra, I think of okra Christmas candy for some reason. You know? And you can leave the ends on if you want. I'm looking for that perfect look. Good. Stick it back in there. And let's just quick slice the rest of it up. I have a tendency to want to do things 3 and 4 at a time. I'm the only guy I know that can slice 2 to 3 mushrooms at one time. Now, if you're going to make fried okra, of course, you do the same thing. You blanch it, but then you just leave these whole, batter them and fry them. And that's another neat thing to do with this, of course. But that's in the frying and grilling session, I believe. Whoop. And there's our last piece there. Okay. All right, now I'm going to take the soup, which has been simmering for what? Since you've been watching it on this particular take. We're going to take it. And first I want you to see the proportion of food to liquid. Right now it looks heavy on the food, but we're going to be thinning it out with a pinch of cream. And if necessary, I'll add a little bit more stock to it. Unlike the thickened soups, like the creams and the bisques, the finishing process on chowders never includes adding whole butter to it. If you did, the butter would just separate in the soup and you'd have a sheet of fat sitting on the top of the soup, which wouldn't be helpful at all. All right, so we'll take the okra along with some of the ice, as it turns out. That's okay. The soup's a little bit thick. You know, one of the things I do, and I think in the stock and sauce class we covered this, and that was the whole process of chilling down the foods by adding ice to it. A lot of times I'll over-reduce the stock or soup if I want to chill it down a store, and then just put ice in it to chill it down rather than recess it into ice water bath to chill it over a period of time. Just throw ice in it and dilute the concentrated nature of the stock or soup in the process of cooling it down at the same time. So, this soup, I'm going to add a pinch of chicken stock to this soup. Now, 3 hours from now, this soup is going to taste better than it tastes now, and it tastes good. Let's have a quick taste of it before we throw the cream and the salt and pepper in here. This soup is good right now. It really is. Let's put a splash of cream in there. Now, you can do all kinds of stuff. I just put a splash of cream in. I don't want to make this. It's not like a cream chowder. Too much cream in here is no good. And we're going to put some chopped parsley in there. Now, if you want to add fresh herbs to the soup, this is the perfect time to do it. If you don't, a little salt and pepper right now and you're all done. This soup needs a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper and a little bit of sugar. Louis, let me have some sugar, will you? And I think what I'm going to do here, this soup looks nice. This is nice. I like this. I'll show you in a second when I get it in a bowl here. Thank you. Let's put just a pinch of sugar in there. You want to be careful. Don't accidentally make this soup sweet. I'm not doing that. You're not even going to know the sugar's in there. So I want to neutralize and mellow a little something in here that, not that I don't like, it's just that I know the sugar is going to make it better. Let's give it a mix. See, you've got some nice colors in there. Looks beautiful. Let's give it a taste. This soup is good. Just wait. I'm going to put a splash, teeny bit more cream in it. That's it. The soup's ready to go right now. I'm going to ladle it into the bowl, and you will have yourself in front of you a beautiful, pretty soup. You make this soup for someone at home, they will be impressed. But I will tell you something. If you do not roast the corn kernels to the amount that I did, the less you roast them, the less this will taste like roasted corn chowder, okay? So you want to make sure you get them roasted enough. You see, you even got brown kernels floating around in there. You see there? And you want to make sure proportionally you got the right amount of soup, liquid for the amount of food that you got. That's nice, that's nice, that's nice right there. And all this soup needs on the top of it is a little bit of chopped parsley, if that, and you're all set. There you go, there's some roast corn chowder. There is no other recipe like this anywhere. This soup only tastes like this soup. There's no soup that will ever taste like this. And it's just truly delicious and extremely simple and not that expensive. So good luck with this one, and put this one in your repertoire. Your guests will like this one a lot.